ጤና ይስጥልን። ባለፈው ፕሮግራማችን እንግዲህ የኮሮና ቫይረስ ወይም ደግሞ ስለ ኮቪድ-19 በአካባቢ በተለይ በኪንግ ካውንቲ በሲያትል ዙሪያ ለሚገኘው ህብረተሰብ መረጃዎችን ኢንፎርሜሽኖችን በተቻለ መጠን ከኢንተርናሽናል ኮሚኒቲ ኦፍ ሄልዝ ስፔሻሊስት የሆነችውን እንዲሁም የኮሚኒቲ ሄልዝ አድቮኬት ኤልሳ አንደርሰን አቅርበን ነበር። በዛሬ ፕሮግራማችን ደግሞ በኮሚኒቲ ዙሪያ በተለይ የሜንታል ሄልዝ ወይም ደግሞ ሜንታል ኢልነስ እንግዲህ እንደሚባለው የአእምሮ የጤና ጥበቃን አስመልክቶ ስፔሻሊስት የሆነች ዶክተር ማክስዌል ሃሪሰን ከሞሊና ሄልዝ ስፔሻሊስት የሜንታል ሄልዝ ኤቨረት ትሰራለች። እንደዚሁም በኪንግ ካውንቲ ውስጥ ትልቅ ሚና አላት። በየቦታው እየዞረች አድቫይሶችን ምክሮችን ትሰጣለች እና በዛሬ ፕሮግራማችን ከሷ ጋር ውይይት እናደርጋለን። መልካም ቆይታ። Thank you very much for coming here, Dr. Maxwell. I think you can introduce us your name, but really we appreciate for taking your time to come to our studio all the way from Everett, and we would like to know about you. I think this is a time where we need support, especially in mental health.
Absolutely.
And can you give us a little bit information about yourself first?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Maxell-Harrison. I'm a behavioral health specialist up in Everett, Washington. I work with youth and families, and I work in a primary care setting. I also am a professor at two institutions here in Seattle, Washington. I'm a mother of two, and mental health is something that is extremely important to me, and it's very timely that we're talking about this particular situation.
Yeah, I think it is very important, even beyond this coronavirus, mental health issues, especially in the immigrant and also minority communities. Maybe it is a social status issue, or it has been going on. I would like to know what's mental health.
Sure.
Can you give us?
So mental health has to do with the psychological, mental, emotional well-being of an individual. It is very much linked with physical health, and I think in the past we would think that physical health would precede mental health, but what we've come to understand is, how an individual's mind and emotional status and the way that they are functioning behaviorally, how all of that works, it actually, affects what happens in the body. So it really has to do with the well-being of the individual above and beyond what is physical.
How is mental health affecting? I know it's related with mental illness, but can you give us how it is affecting individuals?
Yeah. Well, specifically with the COVID-19 situation, what I've noticed is individuals are reporting a lot of symptoms of anxiety and depression. Much of this has to do with being shut in, not being able to leave their homes, problems with their livelihood being affected, not being able to bring an income and take care of their families. And it is putting people in some very unique positions, mentally and emotionally and psychologically, in a way that people feel sort of at a standstill. They feel as if they can't progress forward. There's lots of fear of the unknown, and it's producing a lot of bodily challenges. So, stomach aches and headaches, people reporting things that would mostly be seen as just physical ailments that might be cured by traditional medications. These things don't go away because a lot of people are living in fear right now.
Yeah, I know mental health has so many meanings and also has so many related, I think answers to that what we want to discuss. But that's something we would like to create awareness, especially now in the COVID-19. Really, it's just every family is like in a prison where you cannot go out the way you want to do.
Right.
What kind of positive impacts can we, start, doing things?
Right. So one thing that I have learned in my time in primary care, and also just doing this work for long period of time is we really have to rely on the basics, which is behavioral. So, while certain states are issued these stay-at-home orders, and families are not able to be as mobile as they once were, still going out and being in nature if you can, making sure that you're taking walks, that you can watch exercise videos, spending time with loved ones. This is a great time to reconnect with people that you haven't connected with in quite some time, and just learn to appreciate the people that are in your support system. Also reaching out to support groups and therapists, making sure that you're still taking care of your medical needs, because telemedicine is something that is definitely on the rise because of everything that's been going on. And just doing things that are overall good for your body. So, eating well, making sure that you're staying hydrated, making sure that you are talking to someone about what's going on for you, that you're not balling it up and keeping it all inside. A lot of these things are very behavioral. So there's so much that you can do in this time that I think we need to lend our focus to what we can do versus what we can't do at this time.
Yeah, I know this COVID-19 has, affected everybody else, very stressful.
Right.
But is it hereditary also? Like, it comes through family?
So we've theorized that mental health problems and challenges and disorders do have a hereditary component. And what we've also seen is that it really just depends on the environment the individual is in. So for example, there can be a long-standing history of depression in the family, but perhaps, this individual, whether they're aware or not, is in an environment that helps them to thrive and helps them to feel supported, and perhaps those depressive symptoms don't manifest in the same ways. We also know that there can be transgenerational mental health challenges. For example, you think about communities of color, people that are oppressed, and there is like a depression that's associated with years and years of slavery and oppression, and we see those symptoms and we see those signs in very different ways, from people just remaining silent and not talking about mental health issues. We see the distrust sometimes of the medical community and mental health community, so people staying within their close-knit circle, and individuals being reticent or reluctant to taking forms of medication to help with mental illness. So there is a hereditary component, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the mental illness will manifest. Mm-hmm.
On the news, as we listening, African Americans are really more of affected by coronavirus, and more days, of course, even. But how do you see also on a stress level, immigrants and African Americans? How do you see it?
Yeah. So when you're looking at this, there is a socio-political and socioeconomic aspect that we really need to give a lens to when we look at these two particular communities, African Americans, blacks, immigrants. Historically, what we've seen is they've been situated in, lower socioeconomic environments. And so that's already stressful and has its own implications and impacts. Mm-hmm. And then on top of this, when you take away, the ability of these families and these individuals to provide for their families, when you limit resources, when you don't talk about the issue, when media doesn't give enough coverage relating to the particular circumstances and challenges of these communities, what it does is it spreads like wildfire, and it, I think, increases the stress, and it makes it very difficult for these individuals to feel as if they're heard, and if they are going to get supports during this really unique time. And so how I see it is these communities are already at a disadvantage, And what we are doing is continuing to place them at a disadvantage when we don't have these conversations, when we don't specifically lend resources to these particular communities and understand what their individual needs are. Because unfortunately, not every community needs the same types or amounts of resources. And if you're already at a disadvantage, we need to start looking at equity a little more.
Yeah, I know how long we're going to stay, social distancing. I don't know when, but as you can see, especially in the immigrant community, in the minority area, I don't know, we used to go even Starbucks,
Right.
you go there, socialize, coffee, faith-based organizations, mosques, churches, and communities, gathering, we go, every weekend, something like that. Now it's tough, really, especially for the immigrant, you are confined in one room.
Right.
And what do you think the implication is, about it? And what can we do about that, really?
Right. So I wish that I had one specific answer for that. And this kind of goes back to the idea of collectivism. And, these communities like African Americans, immigrants, tend to come from more collectivistic cultures, which means that we are very family bound. We rely on, our inner circle, our families. And so that's where our support system starts. And because things are so limited, so not being able to go to mosque, not being able to go to church, not being able to go outdoors or convene with people who are normally in our families or our social circles, I think it continues to further the mental health and emotional challenges for these particular communities. It doesn't make it impossible, but now what we really need to look at is unique ways of connecting. So the implications, can be pretty drastic for these particular communities, and at the same time, it's not impossible to connect by Skype or Zoom. It's not the same, and I want to make that clear. It's definitely not the same, but I think we do what we can in this time to try and make the best of, a situation that's sort of out of our control.
Mm-hmm. Technology has changed the way we do things,
Right.
and it has been, for a while, but now COVID-19 actually, more of, school, classrooms are now online. People are communicating through Zooming, Skype, all that kind of communication. What kind of impact do you think, between people's relationship, talking to you
Right.
here? So it's more closeness, one-to-one, this kind of environment. That's how we've been living. What kind of impact do you think? Is there any positive and negative impact of it?
I think there are definitely both. So I'll start with the negative things first. I think we already live in a very fast-paced time, and in the United States, we're all about go, go, go all the time. And so technology can make things very easy and place things at our fingertips and make it so that we are able to connect quickly and more efficiently at times. But also what we don't necessarily take into account is that not everybody has access to technology, and not everybody has access to the same kinds of technology. So unless, everyone was able to equally have a share in this pool of technology, not everyone is going to be at an advantage. And then also, when I think about family members and friends who don't have the same kinds of technology knowledge that I have, there's a huge learning curve, right? So that's something to take into account. It also, and this is personally and somewhat professionally, since I've switched over to, to telehealth and I'm doing a lot of my services online or through the telephone, it feels a little more impersonal. I've had, patients and clients say to me, doctor, it's very different now not seeing you in person. I don't feel as if I can open up the same way. Some people get very anxious around being on the phone, don't really know what to say. So we lose that sense of personal, connection. And I think it can further sort of dampen any depression or anxiety. I also, like I mentioned in the beginning, teach at 2 different institutions, and I'm learning that students are having a difficult time with, keeping up on deadlines and having to basically pace themselves in these online courses. And so there's a lot more responsibility, even though there is the ability to be more efficient and to have work done. And then just with media in general, people just have to be very careful about the types of news that they are allowing themselves to go by, simply because we can't just take everything that we hear as gospel, right? And people have to just be aware of what the implications are for believing everything in the media, but also being mindful and being safe and not doing things that are putting themselves or other people at risk. In terms of like the positive aspects, like I said, individuals can have information at their fingertips, but it's also the matter of what information is it that we're taking in. And then also, because we live in a technology era, people are able to connect with family members and friends all over the world in a way that we have never been able to connect. So it can be really nice. I use this opportunity to tell patients and clients to make sure to reach out to somebody they haven't talked to, or reach out to a family member, a friend, or a colleague from afar, simply because we have that technology at our fingertips. Yeah.
Thank you. Another thing is, especially in the immigrant community, really, there are family members, a lot of family members who have language barrier, the cultural barriers, even the technology is one aspect. They don't have more of it, especially in the low-income communities. There is no access to computers to learn more often. What kind of environment can we create for them, because they are very much older, generation, and is there any advice for them?
Honestly, I believe that we have a moral responsibility right now to keep, the elderly, the people that are in our support systems who don't have the same kinds of access to technology, informed about what we see and what we hear and how we're being affected as much as we can, simply because I see this as a way of protection. Because, you're absolutely right. Not everybody has access to the news or has access to, like an iPhone or an Android phone or computer. But if we are able to phone, a family member or a friend, it is really important that we let them know what it is that we're seeing and experiencing over here, to collect information from them about what their specific needs are. And we still have the postal service, we still have the ability to send things to family members, and I like I said in the beginning of this, we have a moral responsibility to make sure that we are still touching the lives and taking care of people in our families, even from afar.
Yeah, one aspect is actually there are elders, of course, but even us who grow up back, Ethiopia, I'm an Ethiopian, but we have this cultural, stuff that we brought, like pride, even, that's who we are, identity, all this. There is a stigma, in our community, and there are so many things that we are still trying to come up, and that's something we are really worried, because we are not getting the way. What kind of message? What can we do? Stigma is one area, just to let people know that if they have issues, bring it out, go to the doctor, talk about it with friends, with family members. But still, it is an issue.
Stigmatism in this country is nothing new. And for people of color, for marginalized people, this is not a novel concept. And once again, going back to the idea of a moral responsibility, this COVID-19 situation and just where we are politically and just as a nation has sort of put us in a very unique place where, all of our values are challenged, right now. And it's understandable wanting to keep cultural aspects and preserve who we are, especially if we come from cultures where we don't talk about mental illness, where we don't talk about body ailments or medical concerns. But right now, I think this is a great time to just be encouraging of one another. And this has to start, I think throughout the United States. This can't be something where we place the onus on immigrants or people of color to come out of their shells and speak about what it is that they need. We need leadership. We need individuals at the top politically. We need to have our doctors, our psychologists, our mental health providers reach out and just do a little more and reach out to these specific communities and glean whatever information is necessary to help these communities, but still be respectful and mindful of what the cultural values are and how, we and they want to be preserved.
Yeah, really, I appreciate your knowledge. You are, on this, position, and we need maybe this in the future on the continuous basis. But what kind of resources, especially, currently, if you have one, you are one of the resources.
Yes.
But we would like to know more about the resources. Where can we go? I know
Sure.
county. If you know anything,
Sure.
regarding.
There's actually a myriad of resources right now available for supports. One is through Shamsa. The other one is we have the crisis line through 211. And then, I always encourage people to go through their local NAMI chapter, so the National Alliance on Mental Illness, find their local chapters, because their websites usually have information about support groups and online therapy. And while it's ideal to talk to someone in person, we might not be able to do that for quite some time, and I think telehealth is going to be the new normal for a little bit. But all of those social media outlets that we talked about, Facebook, Twitter, there are many individuals and organizations pushing forth efforts to ensure that people have access to just articles and wellness information. The internet can be a great source if you know where to look. There's also, through apps on your phone like BetterHelp or Talk Therapy, you can access a live therapist and do video sessions with them. And there are ways to talk to people in chat rooms when you need some support. So there are a lot of resources available, albeit they're not necessarily what we're used to. I know it would be helpful to talk to someone one-on-one and in person, but right now we definitely have to practice being safe and being mindful of our brothers and sisters, the people that are around us. So.
Yeah, one thing that I didn't ask you is about, symptoms and
Sure.
signs, about mental illness.
That one can be a little difficult. However, because body and mind are linked, and because there are cultural aspects of how mental health illness is brought to the surface, it can come in the form of stomach aches and headaches and just low mood, low drive, lack of motivation. So anywhere from bodily ailments to, just the sheer expression, depending on what your culture allows or what is considered socially acceptable in the culture. There are so many different symptoms and signs of mental illness. And so I think it's just really important to get a good just background and some information about how long these things have been affecting an individual. I always like to rule out any types of medical concerns first. But even with that, we want to make sure that people are attending to their mental wellness. And, any signs or symptoms that have been there for an extended period of time, we don't want to ignore.
Okay. What do you think the mental illness with suicide? Is it more of correlated?
Mental illness.
Mental illness and suicide.
And suicide.
Yes.
So, yes and no. I think once again, there's some very cultural aspects that go along with suicide and suicidal behaviors. We tend to see suicidality and suicidal ideation as a concern with mental illness, usually, associated with like depression or anxiety, but it could be due to other things, problems with substance use or, weight loss. So we don't necessarily, and we can't say with 100% certainty what is exactly causing the suicidal ideation outside of what an individual tells us. But it is really important that if an individual starts speaking about, suicidal ideation, or they start to have a drastic change in behavior, that we are not ignoring those signs and that we are actually getting them the help that they need.
Okay. Yeah, our program is mostly it's for young people, and really they are and ambassadors, and they go to their family and talk about issues. I think this is one issue they have to discuss with it. What kind of message, like what kind of advice do you give for young people, especially in this COVID-19 environment, where family members are together for a long for a long period of time? So what kind of environment do you think they create for their families, just to play with or to do activities, anything?
It can be really difficult staying at home, and staying at home for extended periods of time when you're not used to it. I know my kids get a little stir crazy at home and they want to leave and they want to go do things, and we're very limited in what we can do. But it is still really important that we find space for ourselves, space for one another. And that doesn't necessarily mean physical space, but if there are things that you love to do, like draw or paint or write or watch funny YouTube videos, that you're making the time to do that. But you're also making the time to talk to one another and really communicate about what your needs are right now. This is, not the time to spark old arguments or, to get in each other's faces about things, because what we really need is just a stream of positivity during this time. And I just recommend stay connected with one another. What's really difficult is I've had some, high school seniors and individuals that were on the verge of graduation that now are not able to graduate or perform in the ceremonies in the way that they would have dreamed of. And that can be really hard, making sure that you're talking about that, or that you're having a nice little ceremony at home, doing something to commemorate these years of hard work. And then also, just ensuring that you are taking the time to still take care of yourself physically. Like I said, make sure that you're hydrated, that you're eating well, that you're doing as much of what you used to do in what I call the former life now, within reason, and being safe about it.
Great. I know you have a second segment, really, Dr. Maxell. I appreciate for conversation and for your advice. Absolutely. And maybe another time we'll have with a different environment, maybe with more conversation with other media people. And thank you very much for coming.
Absolutely.
And thank you for the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
በዛሬው ፕሮግራማችን እንግዲህ ዶክተር ማክሴል ሃሪሰንን እያመሰግን በተለይ ስለ አእምሮ ጤና አጠባበቅን በሜንታል ሄልዝ ዙሪያ ያላትን ምክሮች ሰጣናለች። እንግዲህ በዛሬው ፕሮግራማችን ያቀረብነውን እዚህ ላይ እንጨርሳለን። ደህና ሰንብቱ።